known as John Fay, the author of the Shawcross Letters, my journey into the mind of evil, which is about my relationship with late serial killer slash cannibal from upstate New York, Arthur John Shawcross. And overall, I'm a writer, but I have what's been known as a first-hand understanding of, say, the serial killer mindset and deviant mindsets in general, basically. And I'm from and in now Boston, East Boston specifically. Uh, yeah.
So how would you describe your childhood growing up? Would you say you had a pretty good childhood, or?
Well, basically, it was all traumatic. I mean, it was all bad. None of it was really especially good as far as my parents were concerned. I mean, they were both non-caring, and my father was basically a typical psychopath, I guess you'd say. So, highly abusive physically and emotionally, certainly. Uh, so it's my aunt and uncle who were kind of my saving grace and kind of balance that in a way. Not exactly because they were crazy in their own way, and were a little too accommodating. Certain things I was looking for or wanted that be considered illicit, certainly for children. And, yeah, so I'd say overall it was a way off balance childhood. Yeah.
Do you remember any type of incidences that happened when it came to abuse when you were younger? Like any specific incidents?
Yeah, yeah. When my cousin had this was a totally obviously ridiculous thing, but she had eaten the last of some ice cream thing in the fridge that my father had wanted. He was drinking all the time, and so he obviously wasn't in his right mind. So I got blamed for it basically, and kind of came into my room. This was when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and beat me so badly that I had bled onto the bed and stained the bed. And my mother just stood by watching that. But I slept on that same blood-stained mattress for many, many years, my late teens anyway, at least. And so that's why that one sticks out to me. You know? uh, yeah, but there were a lot of things like along those lines.
Was there ever anything that was like debilitating, like where you ended up in the hospital or anything like that?
Uh, Let me think. As far as a hospital, no. I mean, well, my cousin shot me with a hunting arrow, one of my uncle's hunting arrows, the ones you'd kill a deer with, one time in the back of the neck. Thankfully, he didn't have the bow pulled all the way back, or it would have went straight through. But it did stick into my neck, and I had to go stitches for that. But I mean, that's you know. So, like I say, they were all basically demented in my family. Yeah. So that was my cousin, though, but nothing from my father or my old mother.
Do you know if your mother or father have any like diagnosed mental illnesses?
I think my father was diagnosed as schizophrenic many, many years ago, back in the 80s, and alcoholic, and just, like I say, definitely at least a psychopath, at least. I mean, I think his alcoholism really attributed a
Did
lot
he
of
ever
that.
do any time in like jail or prison for anything?
Did he, my father?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just briefly for my mother was divorcing him, and so I guess whatever she told the police, I don't know. He was in jail for a little bit, but they let him out in a relatively brief amount of time. So yeah, he was in jail, but it was not a conviction. I mean, he was arrested and put in jail for a little while, but nothing uh, serious.
So did you have any type of strange thoughts or hear any voices prior to your adult years? When you were a juvenile.
Mm, Strange thoughts, yeah, but um, no voices, but things like what imagining, and this is at a very young age too. I don't even know where this stuff would come from. At like 5, 6, 7 years old, imagining women, dominating me and having me tied down and things like that. I didn't carry that into my adulthood on a really conscious level, but when I was a kid, I was imagining these things. I don't know where those thoughts came from, but they were there at an extremely young age, and I remember things like that. And you know, and then one of the things I had wanted to do too at an early age was tie my cousin Michelle up, and while she was sleeping. That was a thought that occurred to me as a child when she used to sleep over. Ted Bundy, I heard, did something similar with a cousin, but he put knives around her and things like that. But I wanted to put like tape over her eyes, and it was a joke, kind of a joke in my mind at the time. Uh, Is my idea of humor. But yeah, so that's something that I remember as I'm sitting here talking to you now.
So was it just
So,
like was it just like strictly thoughts of like a woman dominating you with bondage, or was it anything beyond that, like killing or raping, or did that come like later on in life?
killing stuff didn't come till my teens, and I was going to get into that. But yeah, at like those in my single digits, it was just mostly thinking of the domination idea.
So
So
tell me about the fantasies and delusions as a teenage boy, when those started, like what the symptoms were, what even if it was as something as mild as just having one fantasy of this and fantasies of this every single day.
yeah, okay. Well, I guess they first started to come to me when I was that I remember in a really spectacular manner. I was 15, and just the idea of say hunting down women and stalking them and taking them home with me basically, and just you know being able to keep them and maintain them privately and without having to without anybody else knowing it, or without them ever having to basically be alive again. I guess it's like
So what would that look like then? Would that look like torture, like sexual assault, or like what all would like that look like in your mind, like what you were wanting to do? Say you were to
yeah,
successfully get a woman in your home, like what would have happened?
yeah. At the time, there was I would say there was definitely a sexual element, but there was a cannibalism element. It occurred to me to consume. It just occurred to me one night, and it felt like a natural thing all of a sudden. That just that clicked on. That might have been something dormant in me, that or something possessed me. The idea of cannibalism. So that was always the old kind of central theme to it. But seeing this girl I knew in high school on the train when I was skipping school, and she was. I had thought of taking her to an abandoned apartment nearby that I knew of, and then basically ending her life and sticking pencils throughout her body, like as a kind of odd art project, I suppose. Uh, but yeah, again, I also have artistic ideas about this being an artist and writer, so there's weird, weird mesh there. Um, but yeah, that's one image also that sticks with me as far as yeah, and then like cutting up the pictures in magazines of women, cutting them up at the time to exercise my stress or exorcise it, I should say. Uh, so, and my uncle found a bunch of pages of those magazines that had been cut up at the time when I was 15, 16, and he was wondering why I was doing this. He didn't make too big of a deal of it, but I didn't really get into it. I get into my fantasy, things like that. It's funny. It happened to kind of coincide with when Dahmer was arrested in 1991, when I was turning 15, and it's like it was a little before Dahmer that this stuff in me started to come alive. But I don't know, just a weird coincidence in a way. It's like I had at the time a distant brother, or I don't know how to even say it. It's so bizarre. I recognize that certainly.
Was there like a specific type of woman that you would want to target, or that in your fantasies that were targeted in your fantasies?
I'm a big fan of blondes myself. I like blonde women, but I mean overall, I'm not basically blonde white women. I mean, for me personally, um, that's the primary attraction. Yeah.
So was that the main source of like fantasies, was like stalking, kidnapping them, or forcing them against their will to come back with you and like sexually assaulting them, then killing them and eating them? Was that, or was there anything else that like went on in your head when it came to like other fantasies?
I had the idea that I didn't want to make them suffer uh, inordinately, like excessively any more than they needed to. I didn't want to make them suffer. That's why I had the idea of the whole drugging thing myself, and which I had experimented with on friends later in life, but well, kind of friends, but yeah, basically, I kind of wanted to make that part as easy as possible, my own way. Um, because it really wasn't about the killing. It wasn't so much a idea of sadism. I just wanted to collect them and at the time consume parts of them and keep them that way. And I was always interested in the trophy idea too. Collecting heads and mummified heads. Got into shrunken heads later on in life. So yeah, but not. It wasn't. I didn't want to make anybody suffer really excessively if I could help it.
So you said that you practice on your friends like later on in life. What do you mean by that? Did you like did they allow you to like cut them or cut pieces of flesh on the off them and eat them, or like what exactly were you talking
Uh,
about?
yeah, well, basically, it's how do I say this? Well, friends that I would have come over. One quasi friend, and I had mentioned this on the Dr. Phil show. There, I put sleeping pills into his drink, and it actually worked on him, and he fell asleep. And when he was asleep on the little bed that he was on there, I had shackled him to that, and kind of left him there until he woke up the next day, and he had to, ask me to unchain him and things like that. And another friend, we I did that to him, but we had a ritual thing going where we drank each other's blood. We mixed it with each other's drinks, and we drank each other's blood and kind of bathed it in each other's blood. The idea of the whole vampirism concept, and yeah, I guess that was that's a ritual that does definitely stand out to me. And woke up the next day from that, and my place was covered in dried blood, and I had a court date that morning too, so that made it a little more interesting. I was covered in blood and had to wash it off before court.
What did you have court for? Was it something like, was it anything violent?
Let me think. I think I'm trying to think if that one was for my ex girlfriend thing, where supposedly it's funny. The relationship was like 3 or 4 months, and I was drinking so much during it. I barely remember. I barely remember the relationship. I honestly God. But supposedly I had strangled her and threatened to cut her head off and all this type of thing. And so yeah, I think that was the one. I had a few court dates. I'm thinking that might have been.
How old were you then? Were you still a juvenile then?
Oh no, this was in later in my adult years. I think it was in my maybe early 30s time. So this was
Hmm.
yeah way later on.
So had you engaged in any type of criminal activity as a juvenile, like whether you acted on any fantasies or not, or got even close to doing so?
Yeah. I mean, as far as that, a lot of shoplifting, a lot of shoplifting. I was usually good with that. If you ever do it with a partner, you have to have just the right one, because the wrong one will bring you bad luck, and you get caught. That's the only time I really got caught, if I brought the wrong partner with. But shoplifting, and there was definitely, by the way, a lot of fire setting. I had a fascination with fire as a little child as well. My cousin and I almost burnt down their little shed they had in their backyard at my grandparents' house there. So my father caught us about to set a table on fire, and I got a beating for that. Uh, yeah, which is probably good, because we might have burnt ourselves up on that one. But yeah,
How were you
mainly
when it came to like animals? Were you good with like cats and dogs, or were you ever like mean to them? Or
I was basically always good to the animals. I mean, playfully, I would kind of twirl my cat around in a trash bag, or whatever you call it, shopping bag. A couple of times, one of my cats there, but I wasn't really overall aggressive or torturous towards animals. You know, jellyfish that I used to see in the ocean. I used to try to drop rocks on them when I was younger and things. But I mean, there wasn't anything that I can recall that's overall cruel towards the animal life. But,
have you been diagnosed with any mental illnesses, whether you were a juvenile or in adult years?
well, let's see. Yeah, I mean, definitely bipolar and I have all kinds of anxiety issues. But it's bipolar unspecified, uh, leaning way more towards depression, because that's what seems to affect me the most. Uh, Probably, I mean, it could be. This is just my speculation, doing research to myself. Possibly schizoid, not schizophrenic, but schizoid, avoidant personality, borderline, borderline personality. So those definitely antisocial traits, they say. That's what, naval psychologist had said, antisocial traits, homicidal and suicidal ideologies. Those are the main ones that stand out for me.
Have you ever been hospitalized for any of that? Like whether it was being homicidal or suicidal?
Well, I mean, I'd say a lot of dual diagnosis type of things. I've been hospitalized. It wasn't. I mean, anytime I go to jail or whatever now, especially since Dr. Phil, they always put me in closed maximum security and black box me, So now that's kind of interesting. But I mean, my best friend put a steak knife through my hand a while back, and then later on, I kind of stabbed him in the throat and missed his carotid by a couple of millimeters. Would have been dead. I didn't consciously mean to do it, but he got close enough to where I did it, and I happened to be holding a knife. So I mean, I guess I got him back, but I really didn't intend to do it, but I did it, and thankfully he didn't show up to the court date. It's a wonderful thing when the so-called victim doesn't show up to court. It's like a Christmas morning for a child. It really is a good feeling. So that case was dismissed anyway. But sometimes I regret not killing that guy. It turned out to not be a good person. I mean, he was robbing people off the streets and shit like that. So that's where I kind of start to streamline into being more interested in getting the bad guys and anything else now. But like a Dexter type of mindset. But yeah, that's something that came along a little later and kind of evolved over time. It's something where, I say, like, again, if you do have these types of thoughts, you really do need to kind of seek some kind of help for it, which at least I have, and you can't kind of evolve past it or learn to deal with it in as healthy a way as possible without having to go kill anybody. So that's the main thing I try to say, and I don't want that message lost, and so I'm seen as a complete lunatic. So it's okay. However people want to see it. I want to say that.
Right. So you had a friendship with Arthur Shawcross before he passed away. In a nutshell, tell me who Arthur Shawcross was, followed up with how you struck up a relationship with him.
Yeah, well, he's basically a serial killer in upstate New York, and let's see, he killed at least 13 people that they know of. He claimed there were more than that, at least 19, and probably there might have been more over in Vietnam. I don't know the way to confirm any of that, of course, and now he's deceased. But yeah, so he was in Rochester, and they finally caught up with him in 1990. And he claimed there was cannibalism involved with some of these murders and things like that. But he killed at least 11 women who worked as prostitutes in the upstate area there. So, but they gave him a 250-year sentence. Passed away in 2008, I think it was. 2008. But yeah, he's basically one of America's cannibal killers, I guess. That's all. Yeah, I ended up talking to him in 2000. I was selling some of his artwork on eBay that I had ended up with, and not directly through him, but through someone I had made a trade with or something on eBay. And so eventually he started writing to me. He got my information, and we struck a deal to do work together, and we split the proceeds, 50-50, and that carried on for a while. And then we just continued to talk to where he became like this ever-present voice in my own weird world for several years there, where I was having my own strange days and nights, drinking, collecting shrunken heads, and handcuffing friends and drugging them, drinking, a couple of those friends, obviously, I never heard from again for obvious reasons. But so that's what. I'll answer anything else you want to know about that.
Yeah. So So obviously, like your common denominator with Arthur Shawcross was the cannibalism, right? That you had the fantasies and thoughts of. Like, so obviously the book that you wrote, you opened up to him about your fantasies and everything. Like, can you talk about what it was like when you told him about that, and like what his reaction was, and how you guys became closer after that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely kind of drew us closer. And, he didn't necessarily encourage me, but he didn't necessarily discourage me. So one thing he would say was, be good or be good at it. So, uh, yeah, we just carried on about that and talk about cannibalism in a pretty good humor, I suppose one could call it. So, yeah, we talk about that type of thing a lot, actually. And,
So would it be safe to say that Arthur Shawcross was mentoring you to um, commit the perfect murder?
well, I don't know. I don't know really. It's so difficult in like perfect murder these days, especially. I don't know. It's not like the old days. It's not like the 70s and 80s and 90s. So I don't. I mean, people are still getting away with serial killing. There active serial killers out there right now. Looking at a list of them earlier today. So,
Did he
but
give you any like tips or like any like clues on not getting arrested, or choose this victim pool, or this or this area or this, like, did he have any suggestions or tips on how to like help you act out your fantasies?
just I mean, basically, I'm just on. We would talk about what saws to use to dismember them. Um, talking about all the different types of saws. That, uh, that's why I was referring to myself as Sawman for a while, and he picked up on that, like that idea, like that moniker, that handle, Sawman. That was going to be the original title for my book, and but the publisher actually chose the title, which is probably better ultimately, because yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll get into that later, but yeah, so that kind of answers your question.
So obviously you haven't killed anybody and cannibalized anybody yet. So what stopped you from going through with that, with your fantasies, about fantasizing, killing somebody, eating them? What stopped you from doing so? Is it like the fear of dying in prison, or the fear of dying by police, or the fear of suicide? Like what's been the common denominator?
I still have a shred of empathy at least, so that's one thing. But also there is, I do believe in karma, or call it what goes around comes around, whatever. And so I do believe in that, and I feel prison is definitely part of that. I would like to avoid prison, and whatever comes after this life, who knows? There could be real literal hell to pay, and so that would be nice to avoid. So yeah, I'm trying to avoid all those types of punishments if possible. Plus, yeah, I do have some empathy still left in me. I'm not a completely lost psychopath or sociopath at this point. Anyhow,
So what do you do to control your thoughts, urges, fantasies, and everyday concerns, especially when, say, you're having a bad day and
yeah,
say you want to feel like, whether you're suicidal or homicidal?
yeah, and I am still both for sure. I mean, it's like I say, it never does completely go away, even if I think it does. It's just kind of dormant for a while, but it'll reemerge at unexpected times. But the main thing I do is I kind of have to isolate myself for a bit. Um, being a writer, I at least used to try to channel it into my writing, but I've had a slump lately, so I haven't been writing. I just try to get away and meditate in my own way, listen to music, or whatever, and or as they say in recovery, you have to play the tape through how it's going to play out, so that helps as well. So I incorporate recovery things too, because I am someone in recovery and constantly in recovery and relapse, all that whole nightmare as well. So uh, yeah, but if that kind of answers your question.
So why don't we round this interview out with having you talk about your book, what the purpose of it is, where people can find it, so on and so forth?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So yeah, I'll show you a picture. I have it over here. Shawcross Letters. See that? Yeah, and that can be found on Amazon. And yeah, I mean, the purpose of it, at least partly, is to encourage others to seek help if they do have these types of thoughts, like I talked about. So that's just, it's becoming more and more of a central idea to me, you know. So but also it's meant to be kind of satirical too. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. You know, I want people to be able to have fun with the reading if they get the book, but it is from in my way a first-hand perspective of somebody who certainly at least could have become something like a Shawcross or a Dahmer. And who knows? I mean, Ed Gein didn't start murdering until he's in his 50s. I'm still in my 40s, so you know I still have some time. You never know. But yeah, and so yeah, but definitely Shawcross Letters can be found on Amazon, and anyone has any interest in. And incidentally, just as kind of a funny thing, I was voted on the top the 10 people of all time who ever quote unquote owned Dr. Phil. You can look that up on YouTube. Number 8 on that. Because he was totally apparently lost with me and out of his element, which I found to be the case while I was there in person with him, which was funny. I find that amusing.